Welcome to another episode of Z-Tech Almanac. Here we're going to be restoring this Macintosh Performa 460 computer way back from 1994. And, we'll take it apart, we'll look at the insides, change or fix any components that need changing, recap it if we need to. Probably we will, but I might make an executive decision on that because there's lots of surface mount caps in there, so I don't know if I want to redo all of them, but we'll take a look anyway, look for bulging caps and things like that, and certainly the power supply is one area where we'll definitely have to recap it. Those are capacitors where, high current, high voltage likely, so if any electrolytics are in there, we'll have to recap it. The other thing that for sure I know I have to do here for this computer or fix is the hard drive. In a previous episode where I restored the monitor, I did turn this on and it does squeal. The hard drive kind of works, it does boot, but it's spinning at a very, very low and uneven speed, and it's able to compensate for that and read the data. So it might be good enough to copy the data off of it. Not sure if I need it or not, but at least have the same exact Mac OS version that I know runs on this computer, because not all versions run. So have that exact same version. I'll copy off the system folder and things like that. So we'll do that, or we'll attempt to do that, and I'll look for a solution for a hard drive, either a brand new hard drive or just a retrofitted flash drive that works with this Mac with a card that converts the signals. So that whole thing should be fun. And of course we have the floppy drive, and we'll see if that works as well. So that likely just needs some cleaning. Well, anyway, let's get to it. The first thing that I usually do, as you've probably seen in my previous videos, is that I start with alcoholic wipes. I have 91% or so alcohol, and I basically go through and wipe things really well. And I go through several times, several layers. I might also use, a little bit of magic eraser, just if I see spots that are really dirty and things need to come off there. So one area in this computer that dirt got in there is, there's grooves up here. And so I'll be using look how dirty that is. I'll be using a screwdriver to get in there and clean that out. So let me zoom in a little bit on the top here with these grooves, which I'll just basically use a flathead screwdriver and a paper towel to kind of get the dirt out of there as much as possible. The next thing I'm doing is just a dusting spray here to get the last bit of dirt out of there. So basically I just go through and get the dirt out of the corners where it gets stuck. And as simple as that. There's not much to this, to clean out those grooves. And there you go. I almost forgot about one important part about this whole restoration project, which is whitening the plastic. And the back of the computer here is the worst. It's just so yellow, and you can tell that the shade from the cables is, has made even a white mark over there. So what I'm going to do, same with the monitor and keyboard, is that I'll just separate all the plastic pieces out from the electronics and from all the metals, and then just leave them in a hydrogen peroxide bath, and probably apply a little bit of UV lighting there just to speed up the whitening process. But we definitely must whiten this case, and I'm sure this will all come out very nicely and will look very, very white once we're all done. So our next question is, now that we cleaned it a little bit, and I will go through and clean it some more with another pass with the alcohol wipes, is how do we take this apart? Big mystery, right? Well, these computers are very, very easy to take apart. They have two clips back here, and all you have to do is just pop those clips, and the top just kind of comes off just like that. So that's it. that's how we take it apart. Okay, let's have a closer look. Well, things look pretty good. I mean, I did turn this on, it did work. So, I expect things to look good in here. And, luckily for me, there isn't a whole lot of electrolytics. There's a couple of them here, this one right there, that one right there. So maybe I'll venture into, changing those surface mount components. And these are going to be easy to take off, but hard to solder on. And we need to really watch the size. It's not just with through-hole capacitors where you can kind of roughly get the lead spacing right. Here it needs to be exact. So that's going to be a challenge to order the exact same parts. But the way, I'll show you later, the way I'll take these off is I'll just twist them off. You can almost do it by hand. And they'll come right off. What else? Well, we're missing a battery, so we need to get a new battery here. So that's important. Otherwise, I'll just keep forgetting the ROM settings. What else? This is the power supply. So we'll take that apart, take a look what's inside as far as capacitors go, and definitely change whatever's in there for sure. That's a must. Even if I were to leave these surface mount capacitors on there, the power supply is a must recap. And I do see some more caps just around, maybe a floppy drive, and the hard drive I'll leave alone because that's probably dead enough where I'm just not going to use it. I'm going to get something else, and I'm not sure what to get at this point, but since they don't make these hard drives anymore, so that's going to be fun to figure out. But yeah, so now I guess the next step is going to be since I do want to whiten the plastic, I want to take off sort of the bottom plastic part here. And this is the perfect time to start taking a bunch of pictures because, something's amiss. Like back in the day, they didn't really label wires, or there's some oddball connectors that, you don't have today. So taking a lot of pictures is crucial at this point, making sure that, everything goes back the way it was. Well, let me tell you, this was very, very difficult to take apart. Just kidding. So this computer, Apple's genius idea is to not use any screws. So everything just clipped in by these plastic clips everywhere. So to take things out, you just have to hold those clips with your hand, no screwdrivers, no tools, because they might actually break. Just with your hand, and just pull everything gently out. So the power supply comes out just like that. The motherboard is a little bit sensitive. You have to push it back and out, but it's pretty easy. And then the drives, the little speaker, the fan, no screws. Everything just pops right out. So there we have everything out. And the next thing I'm gonna do with just the plastic cases, both the top and the bottom, is to remove this metal shield if I can before it goes into the hydrogen peroxide bath. I don't need to hydrogen peroxide that, and I don't want to corrode that with hydrogen peroxide, so that will have to be taken out before the plastic is gonna be whitened. But other than that, that was as easy as that. So now I have the motherboard all separated, and now it's easy to work on caps and whatever else I need to do there. So I've taken apart the power supply, and voila, we have a ton of electrolytics. I mean, there's just a whole bunch here, and they're all kind of squeezed together. And and there's one big one there, so all of them will have to go. I'll change them all. This is an area where you want to be really careful with changing these caps because the power supply is usually the first thing that will go bad. Some of the caps on the motherboard, will probably last a little longer. So they're not necessarily high priority, but I'll change those as well. But these guys here, they all have to be changed if you want this power supply to last for a good amount of time. And in the meantime, I got the case in the hydrogen peroxide bath here, and I got the UV light shining on the back side where the most yellowing was occurring. So So let that shine for maybe about 6 to 8 hours, and then I'll just rotate it around on each side and the front, and then finally on the top as well, maybe a little bit on the back, on the bottom. I mean, just to get that UV light kind of shining on all directions. And I'll probably leave it for a couple hours on each side. The back sides I'm going to leave it the most, just to really take that yellowing out. As far as the time in here, I'm thinking it's going to be maybe 2 or 3 days. I'm not in a hurry to take it out of there. I don't think this thing hurts the plastic or anything else. I've left stuff in there for a long time and it's just fine. Doesn't change anything about the plastic. It really is just a surface cleaning thing, right? So it just pulls out that yellowing that really is on the surface of the plastic, so it really doesn't affect anything else. So fingers crossed, this whole thing will turn out very nice and very bright when we're all done, and then we can look at the computer with the keyboard and monitor and everything together, and hopefully the whole thing will just look very nice and new. So the capacitors are all out, and let me show you how I take these out. So these are the old ones. I use this Utco desoldering gun, and it's really nice because it basically has a real good action of sucking away the solder from the PCB. So in most cases, all I have to do is just desolder with this gun, and this capacitor just falls right out. In some cases, I do have to pull it and try to wiggle it out, and sometimes I squish the capacitor. You can see the little squish there, and that's okay. They're going to be thrown away anyway. But I like this desoldering gun. It's been really nice, and it has been pretty good at not damaging the traces on the PCB, which is another big thing with these single-sided PCBs. They're just going to be super easy to damage if you're trying to hold a soldering gun there and for a long time try to remove the solder, all that kind of stuff. So now I put an order in for the new capacitors. It should arrive in a couple of days, and then next we'll recap this and see how that looks, and then we'll move on to the motherboard, which there's a couple of tricks that I want to show you of recapping the capacitors. One of the first tricks is when you're ordering capacitors, surface mount capacitors, order twice as many. At least I do, just in case, because they're leads. They're super finicky, super fragile. They'll fall off. You'll thank the fact that you ordered some extra ones just in case you mess something up. So that's tip number one there with surface mount caps. So here's the hard drive and the floppy drive. These are both important to salvage in their own way. With the floppy drive, a couple of things of note here. So first of all, we have some electrolytic capacitors that need to change. Luckily, it's only 3. And then we'll have to take it apart a little more to clean the head. And that's just a simple, alcohol swab to clean that. So we'll take that apart next. The hard drive is another story. I know it's not working correctly. It will boot, so it will read the OS and it will read the files off of it, but the spinning is inconsistent. The motor and the mechanics are probably not going to last for long. So really, I need to find a way to replace it, and rather than replacing it with another hard drive, which may be just as bad or almost end of life, I'm going to try to get this SD card to SCSI solution boards, which I just ordered. So we'll see how that's going to work. And, if that works out and I can format it and the Mac can read it, perfect. If not, then I'll have to look for another one of these hard drives. But the floppy disk drive is crucial that it works, because that's about the only way you can get things on and off on this computer. So there's no other realistic way to copy things off, and just every other way is very hokey, very hacky. You can go over a serial port, or it's just going to be really bad if this didn't work. So this is sort of number one priority, and then the hard drive. As far as how to take apart the floppy drive, It consists of this sort of, basically top here that needs to be popped off. So I just go in there with a little bit of screwdriver to kind of remove that a little bit, right? Get that off. And then that's it. The whole thing just comes off. And so, that's the inside, and it doesn't have to be taken off anymore, taken apart anymore. I mean, we really need to make sure that all the stuff is clean here. So I'm going to do that next year to clean some of the stuff inside here. First, we do a little bit of high pressured air here, just to get the dust out. All right, so that sort of cleans out sort of the the really dusty areas here. And then next, we're gonna do the alcohol swab on the read-write head. So now we're gonna clean the head. So I just have alcohol in here, just standard rubbing alcohol, and I gently get in there and clean the heads nicely. And around a little bit as well. Just wipe things off, and the alcohol should take off pretty much all the gunk that might have accumulated over the years there. So that's it. And normally on bigger drives I might put a little oil. This one looks like that mechanism is good. I might just put a tiny bit of WD-40 just there at this area, but just the tiniest bit, just to have a tiniest bit of lubrication. You don't want to flood this with WD-40 for sure, because that's not good. But a little lubrication kind of goes there and maybe here, and that's about it. Okay, so now everything's clean, dedusted. I added just a little bit of WD-40. I didn't show you on camera, but because I was just super careful with it, so I didn't want to accidentally press it too hard and half a can of WD-40 goes on there. So I was trying to be careful about that. The heads are cleaned. If it doesn't work, of course, you can take it apart and clean it again. But I'm almost 100% sure that, unless the electronics are bad, the cleaning here is all that's needed. So, and cleaning and dedusting. So, and then, we'll just need to put this back on, this is another difficult part. Let's get back on. So it's super simple. It kind of gets on there. It snaps in like that. And that's it. Everything's back on. So when we do take the capacitors off, then I do have to get back on the behind here, take this plate off, but that's about it to desolder some of those capacitors. But well, actually no, those are actually surface mounts, so I don't have to do anything. Forgot that those are not through hole, but so should be simple as that to desolder and solder them on the surface. So there you go. So this is now clean and ready to be recapped, and we're moving along here, and we'll see what else needs to be done. Sometimes some of these cables are could be cracked. They're kind of old, and the plastic gets kind of really brittle. But we'll see. We'll see if that's the case. They look pretty good, but sometimes you'll see some cracking and breakages in the cable. So we'll take a look at everything here, and hopefully things will just work. All right. So the power supply is recapped. I got the new caps finally. And I gotta tell you, DigiKey is so slow. I ordered these about a week ago, and they take 4 or 5 days to actually ship it, and it takes another 3 days to actually get here. And so with the COVID and everything, it's just taking forever for them to ship even the smallest amount of components. But I got them, and they're soldered back in the circuit here, and you can tell that they're a little different than the ones I had before. Here's one that was this kind of same capacitor there. These two were the same, and this is the new one. And one thing I'd say about the capacitors is that it's okay to go bigger if you can, if it fits. In this case, everything's so tight, so I was super careful to get the same exact size caps. But bigger is better. It's gonna likely have just better temperature coefficient or just longer life. And whatever you hear about electrolytic caps have improved over the years, it's not exactly true. They improved in a sense that there's better packaging and more sealed packaging and things of that nature. But still, I ended up having, for example, these two caps here being bigger than the ones originally there because I went for a higher rated cap. These are 5,000 hours, I think, and 105C at the very least, if not better. And so they don't quite fit nicely, but they fit pretty well. So, and I'm gonna make sure that this lasts for another at least 30, 40, if not 50 years. For the next person who wants to recap it then. But anyway, so this completes the power supply. Well, of course, we'll have to test it out with everything, but I'm going to put the top and the screws back on, and so we're done with this now. Next up, probably going to be the surface mount caps, and so that's going to be a little trickier because I'm not that good at surface mount stuff, but we'll work through it. So here you can see I took apart the floppy disk drive a little bit, so I have access to the electrolytics, the surface mount electrolytics, and I just want to show you, how to remove these. And the process should be pretty easy, although I chose a difficult one here that's right next to the motor. So what I do is I take a sort of fine pliers here, and I just twist the capacitor to remove it, right? So it just needs to be twisted off in order for it to come off. And this one will take a little bit of time to completely come off. And the reason I twist is so it doesn't tear the PCB traces. And so it will take a little bit of time, especially this one, which is a little more finicky, right, to get out of there. And it's going to be fairly easy to solder back in, and there it is. And so basically just take the little plastic thing off of there and some of the remaining things, and there you go. And that's it. The only thing that needs to be done is to just clean up those small solder joints, make sure there's no remnants of the leads there and things like that. So I do that before putting the new capacitor on, but that's it. And next I'll show you how I might solder the new one on, and that too is fairly simple, but this location will be the trickiest one because it's next to the motor there. You could also take these off with just with the soldering iron. The thing I found is that I actually tried that first because the surface mount leads of these capacitors are underneath the actual capacitor itself. It's hard to heat up all that solder, so it takes quite a bit of heat on a really thin solder tip to heat that up. So if you want to do that, like here's my soldering iron just to see how thin the tip is. It really needs to be set to a very, very high temperature so that you can quickly heat the solder and pop the capacitor off. The risk with that is, of course, is that you're going to pop the trace. So, this twisting method I've seen others do, and I kind of like as well, to really have a clean break, so to speak, from the PCB. So I want to show you how to solder the new capacitors back on. First, what I do is I plop a little bit of solder down there on the pads with a little bit of flux. Not much, just a tiny bit. And then I use tweezers to place the capacitors, right there. It's kind of hard for me to go around the camera here. And I hold it down and I solder it. And, I'm careful not to overheat it, but it does need a little longer time to just melt the solder under the pad. So, I'll just leave it there for a couple of seconds, maybe 5 at most, just to make sure everything's nice and melted, and that's it. So fairly easy if you have room. This disk drive is so difficult because the motor is right in the way, and I don't want to take the motor out because there's a lot of stuff hooked to it, so I don't want to have to redo all that. So I'm just kind of carefully getting some of these caps in here and getting soldered them in. Alright, so the floppy disk drive is done completely now. It's cleaned and we got the caps, new caps in there, and it's ready to go back in the case. Next thing is the motherboard, which I left last just so I can take my time with it to recap that. Oh, and in the meantime, I received this SCSI to SD converter, which I'm going to try out and see how it's going to work. So basically the way this works is that SCSI goes here, and then I put an SD card there, and with the Mac disk formatter utility, which I have plenty of, I should be able to format this to a standard Mac file system and basically use it as a hard drive. The trickiness, however, is that there's no real way to copy things, no real fast way to copy things off of this Mac other than a floppy drive or an external hard drive. So I have an external hard drive case, which I'll put this in to have serve as an external hard drive, and then I'll connect the existing internal hard drive, the one I want to replace, and then first copy everything to this. The trick there is that the question is does the internal hard drive gonna survive as long as I want it to copy everything that I want off of it? So that we'll have to find out, and I might have to have several tries for the hard drive to try to copy things off. Most I'm interested in, the actual system, Mac OS system folder and everything in it, because that was set up to work exactly with this Mac. So I don't want to be looking and searching for the exact system version that works with this. And any utilities for disk and things of that nature I want to copy out. That's sort of the critical things. And then everything else can wait, and there's some stuff on there that I may or may not use, but anyway, so I'm going to try this out, see if it's going to function the way I hope it will. Okay, so we got the Mac motherboard here that we need to recap. And as you can tell, they're all surface mount capacitors everywhere. So first thing I do is to remove them. And since there's plenty of room here, I'll just use these bigger pliers to just twist them. And, I'll just do a little twist on all of them. Kind of being careful to continue with the twisting motion instead of kind of pulling up, because if you pull up you might pull up the traces. So just go with the twist as much as possible, and you can see that's coming off pretty nicely. So a little plastic thing comes off there as well, and there you go. So you can kind of remove them that way, and anything else you just desolder. Just use the soldering gun to desolder a little bit of the leftover pins there. So you do it like that way, and just continue doing cap by cap, and there it is. And this is the simplest way to get these off of here, because if you try desoldering the caps, you're going to be a world of hurt, because they're just not going to come off easily. It's really tough to get them off the board because the pins are underneath the cap, so you're only really melting solder on the sides, and you have to have a lot of heat to melt the solder. So now you're risking pulling off the traces, and so it's just a big mess, all around if you're trying to desolder it. Now once the cap is off, you can obviously just have a little bit of solder, a little bit of heat to remove any sort of remaining stuff on there, right? Which has to be done before the new caps go on. So yeah, so that's how I'm removing the caps, and there you go, simple as that. I want to show you here just why exactly is it important to recap. Look at this spot here. I removed the capacitors right from there. It just popped right off. It was just like it wasn't even soldered. Well, what has happened is that the electrolytic juice has flown out of here, out of the cap, and has corroded the solder and some of these terminals. So now what I'm going to have to do is just going to use a Q-tip with some alcohol to clean all this off before the new capacitor goes in. And I'm going to have to check all the solder joints to make sure everything is still good as far as making contact. But, this is exactly why. And, that capacitor might have been still okay. Maybe the value dropped to half or who knows what, and probably did a pretty good job, and so the computer would have worked. But that juice is just corroding and corroding and corroding, and pretty soon the traces will be burnt, and, things will just stop working. So that's exactly one of the very important reasons why you want to recap some of these old computers, old equipment. Okay, so the next step here is to put a dab of solder on all the surface mount terminals, so you can tell that there's a little bit of solder on there. And the solder I use has some flux in it, so that's also needed there to make sure that there's a little tiny bit of flux in there. If it doesn't, then you just put a dab of flux as well. And then, I use these tweezers to, just place the capacitor on top of those top of those solder joints there, or solder blobs, and just solder one side, and then that's it. I solder one side, and then I can just go and solder the other side without having to use the tweezers, and I usually just use my finger to press the capacitor down as I'm soldering it. So, I typically go, back and forth maybe once or twice just to solder, make sure both sides are soldered well. Taking care to not leave the soldering iron on there too long, because these caps are small and heat up very, very quickly. So that's the process, but you do need steady hands and a magnifier usually to really make sure you do it right. And after some careful soldering, all the caps are in. So I got the new caps all soldered in. I use the magnifier and just really check out the soldering joint closely, just to make sure that it's making good contact. And I noticed that the new caps are a little taller than the old ones. Of course, I was careful to make sure to get the same size as far as the terminal width, but they are taller, which just means that I just got really good capacitors. I made sure that I got at least 5,000 hour 105C caps for all of these, all the surface mounts cap, and the other ones as well. So that's why I'm guessing they're just, kind of a little bit bigger than the original ones. Of course, I'm hoping that they're going to last longer, but you never know with these caps, in 30 years or so, the fluid's going to leak again. So it's hard to tell if, better rated caps will last longer or not. But at least they'll should be sustained, higher temperatures and, harsher conditions. So, that's definitely a good thing. Well, with that, we're now complete with the motherboard, and we're ready to test the system with everything connected. So it's time to put the motherboard back into the case, and I want to show you how it kind of goes back in. So there's no screws here. Everything snaps in through all these plastic holders everywhere, and they made it pretty tricky. Ingenious sort of a snap-in system. So we'll see if I'm gonna be able to get this in here. So I think it goes like that first, and then it kind of like slots in there, and then you just have to push it in like that, and that should be it. And that's how pretty much everything kind of goes back in the case. Now, if I'm put back everything correctly, hopefully there's no shorts or anything else, but that's all it takes. And now comes the power supply, and that too, again, no fastening, no fasteners here, no screws, and so that one looks like it kind of goes in like that, and that's it. So just two plastic snaps hold it in, and everything is correctly fitting, which is very good. So there you go. And the rest of it kind of go in a similar way. I'm not going to go through every single component, but everything just snaps in, and it's really neat that everything works like that. The only thing to be careful of is that this plastic is pretty strong, looks long, but you don't want to stretch it too much. It might break. That's the downside of this plastic snap-in system, that it looks like it might break if you try to really stretch it. Alright, so we got everything back in the case. If I mentioned before, one good idea before you even start taking things apart is to take pictures of everything, so you know how everything goes back. most importantly, it's not so much how it goes back, but just precise orientations where, where the wires go from the speaker to the, motherboard and fan and etc. So you can put it back the way it was. And even then, I'm not exactly sure where it went, but it's not a huge deal. But you don't want dangling wires inside that might get caught in the fan or something, right? So I put a new battery in to make sure that's changed. Everything should be hooked up. I'm going to leave the floppy disk drive unhooked just to reduce the number of chances that things might go wrong. Just in case one of those caps I soldered shorted, or I bridge the solder joint somewhere. So it's just safety. The motherboard I do have to test out as a whole, so there's no way around that. But I'll find out soon enough if it doesn't work. Other than that, plugging in the fan and speaker, important. The hard drive is plugged in. Power supply, of course, has to be plugged in. Make sure that's secure. And that's it. We're ready for the test run. All right, here comes the moment of truth. Everything's hooked up. I got the monitor hooked up and turned on right here. The power to the computer, the keyboard, which is needed in order to turn it on and be able to use it if it actually boots. And the mouse, of course, also needed. You can't barely do anything much with the Mac without a mouse. So hooked up at basically everything that I think it's needed to make sure that it boots correctly. So here we go. So far so good. The hard drive is spinning and it's making a bad noise, so I don't think that's going to actually boot. We'll see. It's sort of we might get lucky here, but unclear what's going to happen, if it's going to actually make it or not. Yeah, there it is. So we got the disk with the question mark, which means that it cannot find the hard drive, cannot boot correctly. So that's okay. We'll try the SCSI to SD solution here to put an operating system on there and boot from that pretty soon. So hopefully that will work. So I was able to find a floppy to boot this thing, and as you can tell that there's no hard disk drive shown up here on the right hand side, just a floppy, and it's just a utilities disk with I'm hoping the software on here is to format a hard drive, which is good. It has a disk first aid and all kinds of stuff here, so it's going to be neat to use that on the SCSI to SD card to format it and all that. So this is a good sign. It does boot, which is good. And so we're basically back in business. Monitor's working well and computer is stable, hasn't crashed. And so we're just going to shut it down properly. Okay. And there it is. And then we can save to shut down. After quite a bit of setup work, I installed and made work this SCSI to SD card here. So this is basically the only thing. There's no more hard drive. This is the only thing that is used to boot the Mac. And I have a mini SD card here that contains the two file systems, or two drives that I've put on there. One is the boot drive and the other one's another empty drive. And basically the way this works is that the boot drive is 2 gigs, and because that's the sort of standard maximum you can do, and then the empty drive is another 2 gigs, and so that should be plenty of space for this Mac. But the setup process for this board is quite involved, so just let me know and I can do a separate video on that. But it's not a simple thing. But I even had to write a little bit of code to get it all to work. So it's all working now, and just to demonstrate here. So you can see the light indicating that it's utilizing that SD card there. And there you go. It boots nicely, and you can see the light flashing, meaning that it's accessing the SD card, and everything seems to be working fine. We'll see if that continues to be the case. Sometimes SCSI interfaces can be tricky, especially with termination and such. So in the software, I did enable a termination for that card, which is a must. But it should be pretty simple, short cable termination on both sides. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that it won't have any issues. And here we have the desktop all booted from the SCSI to SD card. And as I was saying before, we got two drives here. One that's the boot drive and some software on there, and another one that's the the empty drive with 1.8 gigs, roughly 2, but 1.8 once you get down to it, gigs on it. And so far so good. The system has been stable. No crashes, no crazy things. I installed system software 7.55, which is the newest you can install on this particular Macintosh Performa 460. Anything later than that, anything newer than that, does not work, or it's not compatible for this computer. And also, to my surprise, I did at some point end up upgrading the RAM to 20 megs. I think this one came with either 4 or 8 megs, can't remember, but I did end up updating the RAM there. I think it's 4 megs it was, and so I dropped another 16 meg chip or memory card in there, which I can see on the board there. So that's nice. But yeah, otherwise things are looking great. Everything seems to be working. Everything seems to be doing okay as far as the functionality of the OS and the stability. So I'm really happy with the result here. We'll call this project done, at least for now. I will be copying some more stuff on here from an external SCSI drive and things like that, just to get all my software on there. But other than that, this is now complete. Keyboard, computer, monitor, everything seems to be working just nicely. Well, with that, we're complete in restoring this Macintosh Performa 460 computer, keyboard and monitor. As you can see here, we made quite a good progress on whitening the case, and I would say that this looks as good as new. And same with the whole system here, with the keyboard and monitor and computer together. Just everything looks really nice and clean, and just like when we bought it back in '94 or '93 or whatever it was, when we first got this computer. And it works great. The hard drives over time, they're gonna go bad, and so that's the only part that's not original. With the SCSI to SD converter there. But that's a small price to pay to get the computer back and running and working and make sure it functions properly. And I've been playing with it since, and tried a couple of things, couple of programs, couple of games, and everything seems to work great. So it's a big success, and so I'm hoping that it's going to continue functioning for some time, at least for another 30 years, if not more. And I'm going to keep this computer not necessarily a museum piece, but something that I'll use and play around with once in a while. And that's the whole point of these restorations, right? It's not going to sit on the shelf and kind of collect dust, but to actually be used and be functional. So anyway, well, thanks for watching. Hope you learned a little bit from some of these videos restoring this Macintosh Performa 460 computer. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Happy to answer them below. And see you next time.